Hey everyone, it's Jay, and welcome to True Crime and Conspiracy Zone. I hope you're having a good day, evening, or night, depending on what time it is wherever you are. In this video, we're going to get into Damon Thibodeaux and his story, how he ended up on death row for 15 years and then was exonerated. This video is for education and entertainment purposes only. Damon Thibodeaux, 22 years old, traveled from Texas to the West Bank area of New Orleans in June of 1996 for his sister's wedding. When he got there, he decided he would stay there to be closer to his mom and sister and got a job working as a deckhand on a barge on the Mississippi River. July 18, 1996 was a typical hot Thursday in New Orleans. Damon worked, and when he got off, he decided to go and visit his cousins, CJ and Dawn, in the neighboring town of Oswego, Louisiana. Damon and his cousins decided to go out for a night of drinking, and when they returned to their apartment, he stayed the night. The next day, Damon brought CJ to cash his check and to run a few errands, and back to their apartment to hang out. That evening, CJ and Dawn's daughter, Crystal, took a walk to the grocery store. Little did they know that she would never return. When she did not return, Crystal's mom went to the grocery store and asked if anyone had seen someone fit in her description. No one had, and then she notified the Oswego Police Department of Crystal's disappearance. During that time, Damon and CJ started looking all over the neighborhood for Crystal. Them, along with Crystal's family, searched into the night and through the next day. The next day, that evening, Damon went back home to his mom's house to get some rest. A short while later, there was a knock on the door, and it was Jefferson Parish Police Department looking for Damon. They wanted him to go and talk to them. They wanted to speak to anyone who was around or knew anything about the disappearance of Crystal. Damon had nothing to hide, and like everyone else, he was willing to do whatever it took to find his little cousin. When they got down to the sheriff's department, Damon was innocent, of course, so he waived his right to an attorney. For the next 2.5 hours, Damon sits in an interrogation room, anxious, nervous, and tired, for he had been up for about 36 hours. Next, the detectives start hammering down on Damon about the disappearance of Crystal. Within a few minutes, they learn that Crystal has been found. She was found in a wooded area alongside the UEP Long Mississippi River Bridge, about 5 miles from her house. She was found nude, bloodied, with a red wire wrapped around her neck. She had a fractured skull, and through my research on this case, I learned that a family friend found Crystal, who was also convicted of a sex crime. I will have those documents linked in the description box down below. The detectives started telling Damon that all the evidence pointed to him. It pointed to him that he raped and he murdered young Crystal. They told him that he would be labeled a child rapist in jail and that they would kill him. They also told him that Crystal's family stated that they had no idea of his whereabouts when Crystal disappeared. By 1 a.m., Damon agreed to take a polygraph test. When he was given the results, they told him he failed. Did he really fail, though? Keep in mind, the police can lie to you, but you cannot lie to them. That's a double standard in my book. At 4:41 a.m., Damon confessed to a crime he did not commit. He stated that him and Crystal were riding around and she wanted to have sex with him, so they went underneath the bridge. He said he was rough, she said it hurt, and then she kicked him. He grabbed her by the neck and strangled her. He said at some point, I don't think I remember doing this, or something along those words. Damon immediately tried to take his confession back, but me and you both know it was too late. He said he fell asleep on the way to the jail, and when he woke up, he knew it was too late. He knew he could scream, but no one would hear him. 2 days later, 2 eyewitnesses came forward and said they seen Damon on the levee of the Mississippi River, acting nervous and pacing. They later picked him up out of a lineup. Another day and a half later, the autopsy came in, and it did not match his confession. He said he raped her. There was no sign of any sexual contact. He said he strangled her with his hands. She was not strangled by hand. He said he slapped her. She was hit with a hard object. And he said he left her face up. She was found face down. Another 6 weeks later, all the DNA evidence came back in. 86 items were tested, and none of them linked him to the crime or to Crystal in any way. His trial would start on September 27, 1997. It would last 5 days, and just after an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree. He would be sentenced on October 24th, 1997 to death. He said the words were numbing. He would be sent to Angola State Penitentiary to death row. He said on the way, he just looked up in the night sky, shackled in the back of a police car, and said he never knew if he would ever see the stars again. As time passed, with the boredom and the isolation and the dullness of death row, Damon began to spiral and had a void that he could not fill. He said it was much like being a caged animal, and he would just pace back and forth. That he would watch people he became friends with take the walk to be executed, and he knew one day they would come for him. He did not want to prolong the misery any longer, so he decided against doing any appeals. One day, Damon had a visitor named Denise LaBeouf. She was an attorney with Capital Post-Conviction Project of Louisiana. She told him she knew he was innocent, and she wanted the opportunity to prove it. He decided he would give her a try. They had no luck, but her and her co-worker, Caroline Tillman, refused to give up on Damon. In 2001, the Minnesota law firm Frederickson and Byron joined his team on a pro bono basis. In 2002, Barry Scheck and Innocent Projects of New York also joined his team. For the first time in Damon's life, he felt like he had hope and felt like he had a team that really wanted to fight for his life. He said one day he was sitting on his prison cot with a lighter in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and he thought to himself, man, I'm sick of this, and he quit smoking. He began to exercise. He started doing push-ups, jumping jacks, sit-ups, and he had a routine. With the routine, it gave him focus, and his team gave him the hope to live on another day. Eventually, Steve Kaplan, a tax attorney at Frederickson and Byron, would join his team. This happened through a conversation in the hallway with one of his coworkers. Steve was used to doing litigation and tax crimes and normally dealt with white-collar crimes. He said it weighed extremely heavy on him, knowing that if he could not save his client could lose his life. For about 4 years, Damon existed in a file in Steve's file cabinet. But that would soon change. In 2005, Steve went down to Angola State Penitentiary and met with Damon about the investigation they had done on his case. Little did they know that a relationship would grow much like the relationship of a father and a son. When Damon was being brought back to his cell, he looked back at Steve and smiled nervously. At that point, the case took on a whole new level of commitment. Steve would eventually become the leader of Damon's team, and they would become really good friends. They spoke each week, sometimes just about the case, and other times about sports, politics, or any other subject. In 2007, the DA of Jefferson Parish agreed to do a rejoint investigation with Damon's team. At that point, his team, which consists of dozens of attorneys, clerks, students, and assistants, brought all the evidence to prove that Damon was innocent. They showed the mismatch between the confession and the evidence. They showed the inconsistencies in the two eyewitnesses' statements. They showed all the DNA evidence that proved none of his DNA had anything to do with the crime. But then again, there was his confession. They had him examined by a nationally known forensic psychiatrist, Michael Wilner, and he came to the conclusion that Damon was extremely vulnerable and gave a false confession under a grueling interrogation. But the DA was not sold yet. He would have his own expert do an examination of Damon. And his expert came to the conclusion that Damon confessed falsely due to the fact, in partly, that he felt guilty for not giving Crystal a ride to the store that evening. With a false confession, the DNA said they could not hold him on the charges. He wrote a motion to overturn his conviction on September 27th, 2012. The same judge that sentenced him to death overturned his conviction. With one last night left in prison, Damon could not sleep. Imagine that. I would not be able to sleep either. He said he sat with his bags packed on the edge of his cot and just waited for the sun to come up and listen to his radio. He said the walk was surreal. You cannot prepare yourself for that kind of walk because you have been in those conditions for so long. He had been on death row for 15 years. He said when he took those first steps out of the cell, he took them slowly. He said he had to sign a logbook before hearing the words, "Mr. Thibodeaux, you're free to go." When he was released, him and his team would go to New Orleans. He would do media interviews, have a fresh shower, a real bed, and then get to hug his mother and his sister. And finally, he seen his son. He had not seen his son since his son was 6 months old. His son was now 20 years old. When his son was 14, Damon wrote to him from death row and introduced him to himself. His son asked if he could come and visit, and Damon told him no. He said he did not want his son seeing him behind petitions with shackles. He said he wanted it to be face to face. He wanted to be able to hug him and shake his hand like a man. Over the next 5 days, Damon and his son spent time together and got to know each other. And then he was off to start his new life in Minnesota. There would be many firsts for Damon: love, a career, apartment, and some fun in between. In 2013, Damon will walk across the stage and receive his GED. In 2014, he would testify in front of a subcommittee of the U.S. Senate about the grueling interrogation and how he was told he would be labeled as a child rapist and would be killed in jail. About how the interrogators told him about the 3 combination cocktail that would go into his arm when he was being executed, how it would burn as it went in. In my opinion, that's just cruel, and why should people ever treat another person like that, whether you're in an interrogation room or not? And finally, when Damon was 38, he would walk into the annual car show in Minneapolis, and he would be able to fulfill another dream he had since he was a little boy. He met Bill Collins, the owner of Interstate Driving School, and a friendship was struck up immediately. Bill offered to pay for him to go through Bill's school after hearing about his story. 9 months later, Damon was on the road again. Then Damon would soon find love. He seen a gorgeous girl sitting at a table at a convention in Georgia. He said he had to build up the courage to talk to her and never thought that she would ever be interested in him. Boy, was he wrong. I sure hope they have a lifetime of happiness. We need to look at cases from all angles. Does the confession and the evidence match? Or are we just looking for a confession and a person to lock up? In this case, we have a young girl who was murdered and whose case is now unsolved, a man who spent many years on death row in horrendous conditions. We have a child who grew up without his father, and we still have a killer on the loose. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think of Damon's story? What is your opinion of eyewitness, and how much can we depend on their word? Let me know, do you believe if people really give false confessions? I do. And do you know anyone that's on death row? Do you think they're innocent? If you do, what makes you believe that they did not commit their crime? Thank you for stopping by the channel. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.